You're about to embark on a journey through the written word of God on subjects that deal with today. This is Brothers Just Searching.
How you doing, everyone? Welcome to this episode of Brothers Just Searching, where we talk about God's Word and current world events to educate and to edify the believers of Jesus Christ. I'm Isaac, as always, with Brother Bowen Roban and Anthony Hayes. Guys, what's going on?
Well, finally, John, beautiful weather, finally.
I know, huh? Pretty dry out there. You know, had a pretty good weekend as well.
That's right, hey.
How was your weekend, Bo?
Had to deal with idiots at work.
Well,
you had
that's
to
everybody.
work?
You got them too?
At least you was off on Memorial Day, you know.
Yes, I was, thank God.
You was sleeping a lot, though.
Oh, I slept.
You slept? It wasn't beauty sleep.
I slept last night, though.
It wasn't beauty
When
sleep.
I left here last night,
Right.
I went home, I got in my bed. Within the first 15 minutes, I was out like a light.
You did like Ernest, where you just...
Oh, I was gone.
You were out.
I was out.
You was out.
I was dreaming about Jesus.
Hey, that's the best dreams you can
That's
have.
the best dreams you can have, buddy.
Better than dreaming about, somebody else that's in your life,
I don't want to talk about that person. I don't want to talk about that. That's a scary situation.
If he wanted to rent a horror movie, he would have got a horror movie.
I would have got a horror movie. You're right, buddy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Some things
No,
are
hey,
up there.
actually, it's been pretty good, man.
Yeah.
The weather's pretty outside. We didn't get no rain today.
I worked all day. That's the first
That's
time.
good.
I don't know how
That's
long.
good.
It was
You
strange.
gonna work all day tomorrow too?
Yes, most probably. So.
Yeah. It was strange.
Well, that mud, this job is real neat. We got a contract job where we work all the time and we got our money and everything. And today I was passing by. I didn't realize how that stuff smelled.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Like when they do the sugar cane and stuff, and you pass by the sugar cane and you're like, "Whoo, what's that smell?"
Yeah, yeah.
It was in the dirt. I'm like, "Whoo."
That stinks, bro.
Oh, it stinks. It wouldn't come out of my bed for a while either. I had to rock back and forth.
It's bad though. You're gonna get immune to it after a while.
Immune?
Yeah. You're gonna get used to it.
Yeah, I don't think my family's not gonna get immune to it though. My wife told me today, "You stink." She didn't hold back. She said, "You stink." So anyway,
Darn it, you have to go take a bath.
Oh no, I wanted to. I stunk. It's bad when you smell yourself. You're like, "Whoo, I gotta go take a bath." So.
I need to ask you a question.
What's
before
your
we
question?
Go too first,
Sure.
Too far. Next Monday's gonna be my turn, or you gotta let me know.
Yeah, I think it's your turn next week.
Yeah, but you never know. Something gymnasiums might come up, or
Yeah, well, that's in the works, so we don't know how that's working out yet. But it's gonna we should have it should be yours. 'Cause I know you always come up with a fire and brimstone when you read.
Well, I'm kind of studying the Book of Proverbs right now. I might come up with something out of the Book of Proverbs.
That might sound good.
The Book of Wisdom.
Well, I'm gonna let everybody know we're doing we're working on
the
live streaming and some recording and stuff. We're trying to bring people video. I don't know who will want to, but people want to look at us when we talk for some
I don't
reason.
know why they want to look at me for. I mean, I'm not the best looking thing in the world.
And brother, you did not lie. You did not sin tonight. I'm so proud of you.
I ain't gotta ask God for forgiveness.
No, you told the truth.
Well, anyway, on that note, we've been asked to if we could ever do a video if possible. I keep telling people we have the capability, but we're working out some stuff. Well, God has provided to where we can probably start doing live streaming in a couple of weeks. So we're working on that. But what we're gonna do is we're probably gonna start a series in Daniel.
Yeah, we had talked about that.
It's not the whole book of Daniel.
No,
it's going to be the second chapter of when Nebuchadnezzar saw a dream of a statue.
The statue.
And we're going to talk about what the statue represents and it's what happened in the future and all the stuff that came through.
But that statue also talks about the common future too.
Right.
I
think I got a nifty title for it too. I'm not going to give it away. I told y'all the
tell
other
us
day.
the title. Let's wait until we do it.
Right.
I'm
But that
excited.
statue's gonna take more than one episode.
Oh yeah, well I think it'll be a perfect debut for our live streaming audience and the audience to watch after live stream.
Right.
And what people got to realize is not just the biblical part of it too, is the history.
The history of it.
What happened, why the Greeks and Persians fought like they did, and how it linked up to Daniel's
Alexander the
prophet.
Great and all that too.
There's a lot of history
There's a lot
too.
of history behind
A lot
all
of
that.
history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're gonna get to that sooner or later.
I'm excited.
But yeah, I think next week is gonna be your turn. So everybody be ready for bowling. You know.
Well, I think I'm gonna try to come up with something out of the Book of Proverbs. I
That'd
was
be
kind of
cool.
looking at some stuff, you know.
Don't give it away, man. Don't give it away. Leave the audience in suspense.
Well, I'm not telling you what it is. I mean, I'm just saying.
He just said it's Proverbs.
It's Proverbs,
I
but
got you.
it might come out of another book too. I don't know. I
we don't
mean,
know.
I study a lot of different things.
That's why you led by the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Paul
You know.
said, I think it was Paul that said that when he said, don't think about what you're gonna say before
No,
you say.
that's right.
Let the Holy
That's right.
Spirit lead
Let
you.
the Spirit of God lead you.
So we're gonna see what that.
I
But
never
that's
think about what I'm going to say. I'll just come on here and let it fly.
that is
right.
fly.
That's right. No political correctness on this program.
Before we go on, I want to go ahead and last Monday, if you listen to this podcast on a Wednesday when we dropped the episode on Apple, Google, Spotify, and all our platforms, if you're probably gonna hear this on a Wednesday or even after the Wednesday. Last Monday was Memorial Weekend, as I said earlier in the program. And we all enjoyed Memorial Weekend. I went to spend some time with some friends, eat some good Cajun cooking. I know, Bo, and you said you were off, you relaxed. Boogie, I think you did the same thing. And it's a great 3-day weekend, but a lot of people don't understand what Memorial Day is. And I did I think like a 7-minute segment on my other show, The Cajun Conservative, and brought out a lot of key points that I think is important. But I just want to let all our audience know, if you have lost a loved one in battle, or if you lost someone that was in the military, we're praying for you. You know, it's easy to say that, you know, that we're praying for you, but, you know, only people that have lost people in battle.
That's right.
I think that's a special pain, you know. And you know, we have some friends that passed away. Some family members that passed away last year. They were Vietnam vets, and they passed away. And we remember them. They're fallen as well. It's natural causes, but it's just not another holiday. Let's just think about that. Let's think about them.
No, this is about men and women that serve for our country.
Right. And look, there is a holiday called Veterans Day. We all know about it. It's another 3-day weekend or whatever that we have. But, you know, that day is to remember the people that are still alive and still going strong. But to have a fallen hero, look, I have a friend that's overseas right now. His wife and his sons don't see him because he's overseas. And that's a sacrifice that they give, but when they pass on, that's the ultimate sacrifice. So let's remember them this week. You know, I know it's not Memorial Day, but look, happy Memorial Day to everyone that's out there.
Today on Channel 24, I watched something very, very nice. They played they had the music. They played like for the Marines, and they played for the Navy, and they played for the Army, and they played for, you know, all the different services. But they had a song that they played for each one, and they showed, you know, everything, and it was very nice. It was beautiful. I mean, I listened to it. It was something to. It was like a concert.
Wow.
It was almost like a concert.
So you mean there was actually something decent to watch on television?
Well,
shocking.
it was in respect for the men and women that died for our country.
Yeah,
you know, we need
yeah.
to respect that. I mean,
Yeah, I know.
these men and women, I mean, they fought for the country that we live in. If it wouldn't be for them, we wouldn't have the freedom we have.
I mean, even you don't agree with the wars, how they were handled. I mean, these people went out there and their heart did
There's
the
a
right.
lot of these wars.
You know, they
that
did the right.
A lot of these wars that they fought wasn't for it wasn't for America. It was political wars. It was for oil, or it was for something stupid for the government. I mean, it wasn't.
Government
Let's
stuff.
pray though that one day we won't have a Memorial Day. And I was hearing Todd Herman talking on the Rush Limbaugh show today, and he said let's pray that this country will never get to a point to where we're celebrating Memorial Day and not living under the freedoms that they fought for.
Well, they fought for our freedom.
That's the thing, you know.
Right.
World War II vets,
but
they're here. Look, and I heard that today, and that's a political side. The BLM founders said that police officers are walking Nazis right now, and they're trying to take over our freedom and stuff. And that one of them said there was no reason to go fight Germany. There was no reason to go ahead and attack Hitler. There was no reason for that. And if you study World War II, as we have in this room, you realize that if America wouldn't have stepped in,
Yeah, we all would be speaking German.
Would all be speaking German.
Exactly.
And we went fight that war because, what's sad is what they're trying to promote, Black Lives Matter, is what Hitler believed in. And Hitler wouldn't even look at them as a race because he believed in racial purity.
Fascism.
It was fascism, and he believed that Germany was the ultimate race.
Ultimate race, and everybody else were apes and monkeys.
Right. So,
yeah.
But you got to look at it, though, Isaac. You're saying that. I mean, World War I, World War II, all these wars that took place before that, these wars were worth fighting.
Right.
Because it was for our freedom. But think about the wars after that, all these wars. I mean, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, that's another war that had to be fought.
That was World War II. That was World War II.
Right. But anyhow, you think about all the wars that were fought after that. What would these wars fought for? You know what I'm saying? You got a lot of men that died, men and women and young men that died for almost no cause almost. I mean, they died for things that had to do with politics.
Right.
You know what I'm saying, Isaac? Think about it.
But if you look at it, too, the men and women that, like Brother Blackie, that he told us his testimony.
But he fought in the Vietnam War.
Vietnam, but if you look at that, a lot of people disrespected
I don't.
Vietnam. No, we don't. But I'm just saying, a lot of people.
A lot of people do.
Right.
But it was a war that should have never been fought.
Correct. But these men, they were going out there. They was thinking, look, we're fighting for our country.
Yeah,
that's
right.
That's what that bottom line is. Because a lot of people look at the Civil War, and I know we're about to get into our topic. But the Civil War, a lot of people don't want to acknowledge the South a lot. Yeah. And look, what the South stood for was wrong. I'm totally agree with that. They wanted to keep slavery. They wanted other things.
Right.
They had a lot of things in the background that was helping the South. But at the same time,
you couldn't have that.
These were still veterans. They were still part of the military of the United States.
That's
and you still, because they might say, well, look, they were against the North. Right, I agree with that. But
I agree with it.
They were still, because they were called the Confederate soldiers of the United States. So they were still soldiers, and you still would have to respect them as veterans, because this wasn't like a civil war that you have in overseas, where these were people from the jungles that came jump out and just all of a sudden say, hey, we want to take over the government, overthrow the government.
They were fighting for the freedom of
They disagreed, and they broke away from the Union.
Right.
And the Union said, well, we don't want you to break away, so they fought a war to keep them there. And the South was fighting. There's a lot of things going on with the Civil War. There was a lot of mixed things. And look, I'm going to disclaimer right here. I'm not saying what the South did was right. I'm not saying that the South, they were wrong. But them soldiers, I think there's a cemetery of the Confederate soldiers and it's a national landmark.
Yeah, it is.
And these are soldiers that died for the Confederacy.
Yeah.
And look, I'm going to be honest with you. I think if half those soldiers and half of the people knew what was going on in the South, because like we was talking about the Vietnam and other wars that happened, they didn't know. Look, we're going to fight for our freedom. We're going to free other people. That's what their mindset was.
That's what their
and
mind
in the background,
was.
there was politicians playing games that caused those wars.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think a lot of people in the South, if they knew what was going on behind the scenes with the generals and why the South was getting funded, I don't think they would have done it.
They wouldn't have done it.
They would have done it.
No.
So, but that's a little bit of history. But anyway, happy Memorial Day to everyone out there. And all to the families that lost someone, we are praying for you. We do stand behind you here at Brothers Just Searching. So, all right. So we're going to go ahead and talk about some church history tonight.
Yes.
There was 3 books that came on the Mayflower when the Pilgrims settled here.
Mm-hmm.
The Bible, the Fox Books of Martyrs, and another one that is very popular, John Bunyan's book, The Pilgrim's Progress. Now, we're not talking about the book in general. We are talking about the man that wrote the book, because a lot of people might read this book and they would think, oh man, this dude was a spiritual giant, man. God bless him. Because you see all these ministers that write books and they get lifted up and they're like, oh wow, look what they done, man. They live in, a lot of these people live in nice homes. They're not living under persecution. But John Bunyan wasn't like that. Right. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn it over to Boogie, because Boogie, that is your favorite author, correct?
Yes. I wrote 2 books. I wrote one, Journey of the Christians from Dead Words to Living Faith. That was my first one. And then I wrote a new one a couple of years ago, The New Kingdom, with Liberty Man and Evil Stone. So the first story for sure, The New Kingdom, on my second book was inspired in some parts by John Bunyan's book, The Pilgrim's Progress. But I want to give a little detail about the book before we begin, about the author and the situation of his time and why he was arrested. So we got a lot of history to talk about. But the Pilgrim's Progress, I encourage people to go watch. They got films and cartoons. They made a cartoon about it a couple of years ago. That was pretty interesting. And so what the book's about is about a Christian allegory, or we call it parables or stories. It's a fancy way of saying stories. And it's about a Christian life. It's about us living Christians. As Christians, we go through things. And so in the story, there's a guy, his name's Christian. Our pilgrim, he's leaving the city of destruction, and he wants to find a better. He reads the book or the Bible, and he reads about escaping the judgment of his town, and then a missionary comes to him, or what's his name, evangelist comes to him and shows him the way through to Celestial City, going on the path.
Didn't they have a book also, like why he was in the city of destruction? I know. The new cartoon did that. He didn't have the burden on, but he started reading this book.
It was the Bible.
Yeah, well, I know it was the Bible, but they presented it as a book,
right?
And all of a sudden, that's when the burden started growing
on because it was representing sin,
right?
And what happened was, in the story, he's led through this road, and he faces all kind of temptations and fears, and he meets some people who are trying to discourage him, trying to get him off the path. And then there's some people like Faithful and Hopeful and other groups. There are people who are trying to help him to go to the Celestial City, or heaven, the city that represents heaven in the story. And most people don't know that, but there is actually a part 2 of Pilgrim's Progress. It's Christiana. Her husband goes to the Celestial City, but she don't go with him. So in the second story, she decides to go follow the path her husband took, and so she takes her journey, her and some other people with him. And so that's pretty interesting. So I encourage people to go read it. Like I said, it's an allegory of the Christian life. And of course, he wrote many other books, but we might get to some of them if we have time to talk about some of the books. But he was a great man of God, and he inspired the Christian
people
the world.
You say he wrote other books. Like me personally, until you told me that last night, I didn't know they had that John Bunyan wrote other books.
Oh, matter of fact, altogether, he actually wrote about 60 books. And that's not counting sermons and other things.
You're talking about John Bunyan, which I don't know much about the man. I know his mom and daddy were Mr. and Mrs. Bunyan. But no, it's just the man wrote all these books. Usually when a man writes books, he lives the life to write these books.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
So I'm pretty sure John Bunyan lived a life.
Oh, he did.
And lived through these things to write the books that
matter of fact, I'm glad you mentioned that, because there is some parts I will talk about how in real life it did influence his writing.
Okay.
I mean, every writer, every fictional writer will tell you 90% of the time, the plot is fictional, but there's a lot of things that we do put in our life. Yeah. We put our things that will inspire us.
Also, you got to realize something too, and I know Bo's going to bring that up.
Yeah.
John Bunyan was in prison when he wrote Pilgrim's Progress.
Yes.
But when he didn't just get this from like thinking one day in his jail cell, not that he was just sitting around not doing nothing.
Right.
He had a dream. Everything that he's seen in Pilgrim's Progress was just not from his imagination. The Lord gave him this.
What I was saying is he lived through some of that stuff.
Oh, he did.
Right.
Well,
he
God,
did.
God
yeah,
used,
definitely.
I think, if I'm not mistaken, God used his life
to show him.
Because if I'm not mistaken, but correct me if I'm wrong, in Pilgrim's Progress, his name was Pilgrim. He was Pilgrim.
Yeah.
He was walking that. Yeah. And we remember we were talking about that a little bit last night. It's basically, if you watch, I watched the movies. I never read the book. But if you watch Pilgrim's Progress, he's on this road. He's on the straight and narrow road going to the city of the Celestial City. Mm-hmm. And he meets up with a man called Worldly Wiseman. Worldly Wiseman, and tells him, "Oh, well, you don't have to stay on this path. This path's way hard. It has all these issues. But if you go down this path, you better get your sin off of you." And in the cartoon, he comes to a mountain where it's like Moses, and he's writing commandments.
Yeah, I like that when they did
the law. and he was trying. He said the figure that was Moses or the law said, "Look, come up here and I'll take that pack off of you." As he's coming up, there's stones of laws and they're like lying, stealing, cheating. And he's like, "Well, I can't get up. You keep blocking." He goes, "Well, you need to settle this." And he said that, and his burden kept on growing because he was doing it instead of focusing on Christ
and the cross
and going down to the right path.
He was focused on himself.
He was focused on himself in the law, trying to do it by his own
Yeah.
ability, and he falls down.
Right.
The cartoon's powerful. A lot of
Oh,
people,
I
I don't
love
want to
it.
watch a cartoon. If you watch, look, and they made a movie that I'm aware of. They made multiple cartoons.
Yeah, there's a few.
There's tons. There's an older show from I think the 60s or something like that.
90s or 80s,
All the movies are powerful. But the cartoon, I think
That's the best one
is
so
the
far.
best one. Yeah, and they're making a part 2. I heard. So
I
don't
hope
know.
so. Well,
So,
Christiana takes her journey. Yeah,
Yeah, so I'm not sure, but that it showing basically it was showing Pilgrim.
yeah.
Hey, this is the walk you got to take. It's not always going to be easy because like there's one part they coming across a swamp and one of his buddies like, man, I'm going to go with you.
Yeah,
he didn't have no burden where he walked through the swamp. They sink. Pilgrim gets up and his buddy comes out and says, "Man, this is too hard." And that was just the beginning of the journey. He went back to the city of destruction.
The swamp of despondency. Yeah, the swamp of discouragement and fear. Yeah,
Look at using them big fancy words
yeah.
just like that tonight,
I'm an
man.
author, so I mean,
He's good with the words like that. Anyway, so what about John Bunyan?
Well, John Bunyan,
we're talking
he
about
was-
his book, but let's talk about John Bunyan.
well, John
himself.
Bunyan, he was born on November 1628 in Elstow. That's a town in England.
November, you said?
Yeah, in November. Yeah, 1628 in Elstow, England. He was a town in that area, and his father that we know of, his father was a tinkersmith. They call that. What it was a man went to pots. He went fix pots and pans. He would grab tools, and if there's somebody, like if, for example, if a lady was cooking and her pot got broken, he would come fix them. Pretty much, it's kind of like in the 60s when you didn't have to go buy a TV. You can just go get it to a repairman and he'll fix your TV. It was kind of similar, kind of like that. So what happened was John Bunyan later on, when he grew up, he followed his father's trade and he became a thinker, they call that. He even made a violin. He was so good at it. He made a violin one.
That's why he was a good artist.
Yeah,
he was a thinker.
Yeah, that's right. He think a lot.
He think a lot.
They actually call him the thinker and thinker of Bedford, matter of fact.
Ah.
But what happened was when he was a little boy, he grew up. He had a bad thing of cursing and swearing a lot. I guess we call him a modern day sailor.
Yes.
I mean, he was not, but he would curse and lie and swear. And he would have visions and dreams, like him falling into hell and stuff. God was trying to reach him through. Even back then, that was his first visions or dreams. Really, God was trying to get his attention. And then, as the story goes, one day he was cursing and swearing, and had this lady. She owned a shop, and she was a cursing sailor. Everybody knew she was bad, cursing and swearing. But she said when she heard him one day, she was even shocked.
Cool.
That's how bad. And she said, she told him, John Bunyan, "Why are you cursing? Why are you doing that?" And he convicted him. And he said, "Wow, I must be really a bad boy for this."
Let's call him the kettle black.
Yeah. But God used that to convict him. He says, "Man, if this woman lies and swears, and I'm topping her, I'm not in good position."
Let's call him the kettle black.
And then that was a time where
That's some morals.
they had some morals like
Yeah.
today, man.
You call that having morals? I don't call that having
Well,
morals.
no, I'm just saying
Yeah,
society
at
as
least
a
that's
whole,
some
man.
at
Cussing
least that's
was
some decency.
now cussing, man.
That's just normal.
You having a normal conversation, the F word comes out 5 times.
Yeah.
I'm just saying,
But what happened?
how times have changed.
But what happened was as time went on, God kept dealing with him. But at the time he got to the age of 15 years old, or 16 or 15 years old, his mama died.
Mrs. Bunyan was gone.
Yeah, his mama died. And what happened was he got angry at his father because he married a second time just like a few months after his mama's death. So he was really angry. He was really upset with his dad. So he wanted to leave home. But at the same time when this was going on, England was in a civil war. And there's a little bit of history why. I'm explaining why there was a civil war. What happened was when the Reformation started taking place in England, like in Germany and other places in Europe, then it started spreading to England. William Tyndale, John Bunyan was not even born, but Tyndale wrote the English Bible. he turned it into to Latin to Greek to English. And what happened was, when he was getting burned, he said, before he got burned, he said, "Lord, open the King of England's eyes." So, and that was King Henry VIII. Then what happened was, a few months, his prayers were answered, because King Henry VIII and the Pope got into an argument, or they fussed, because the king wanted to marry and divorce and marry another woman. But the Pope said, "No, I ain't gonna take no more of this. You've been married so many times. I'm getting fed up with it." And so he got mad at the Pope.
The Thomas went out.
Right. And then King Henry got mad at the Pope. So, "Oh, you won't give me what I want, so I'll go leave the Catholic Church and I'll start my own church," kind of like people do today.
Yeah.
You know when they get mad at a certain denomination. Well, I'm gonna get mad.
You go to a Catholic church once a year, you consider a Catholic.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but the problem was King Henry. He didn't completely throw away all the Catholic stuff. Matter of fact, he had some Protestant influence, but he had some Catholic teaching still into his church,
which is funny too.
Yeah, and it was the Anglican church.
What was funny is that too, a lot of people don't put that together.
Yeah,
the King James Bible, because of that split.
Yeah.
The King James Bible became possible because years later, when King James took over the throne,
that's right. Yeah.
He said, "Well, I think the people should have the Bible to read in their common language."
That's right.
That's when King James went get all the scholars and the theologians and put them all together and said, "Look, here's the scrolls. Write a Bible."
And that's what they did.
And that's what gave him the freedom, because see, if he was been still under the Roman Catholic authority,
he couldn't do that.
He wouldn't have better done that. He was considered breaking treason, because at the time of the Dark Ages, you couldn't have a Bible. It was only for scholars and theologians and priests of the Catholic Church.
But the problem was, though, in a way it was good, but in a way it still came back to haunt the true believers. Because what happened was, that was his church. But if you broke away from the state church, or you broke away from his church, that was considered treason. Most people don't realize that. If you didn't go to church the king went, you were considered like you were treason for doing that. So what happened was, King Henry was like, and these other kings that came before him was like, "You have to belong to our church because that's where we are." So anyway, it was known as the state church. And so if you didn't belong to it, you were considered in trouble. But anyway, as time went by, a king named Charles I, he was king of England. And what happened was, he accepted a lot of Roman practices. Matter of fact, he was actually married to a queen. I think she was from Spain or somewhere, and she was Catholic. So he had a lot of Catholic influence, but he actually loved the Catholic ways. He liked the Catholic prayers, the way, and stuff like that. But what happened was, Parliament, like the government body, they were more with the Puritans. Now the Puritans, they were a hard-string reformers group, and they believed strictly on the Word of God. They actually want to reform the Anglican Church. They want to bring it to a simpler worship. And so that's what the Parliament wanted. They were more on their side. They were more of the Puritan side. And so there was a lot of that's the religious part that was going on. And so they were fighting and fussing, and and then also, like for example, in Scotland, the king was trying to force the people in Scotland to accept the Catholic way of praying. And matter of fact, he made a book. It was called a prayer book, and it had a lot of Catholic stuff into it. And in Scotland, at the time, the Reformation took place in Scotland, and it was Presbyterian. And John Knox started it. He was a reformer in Scotland. He started the church. And then they were like hardcore. It was amazing how Scotland was completely hardcore Catholic, and they switched to Protestant a few years after John Knox. So what happened was, the preachers would go up to there doing the Catholic stuff. And matter of fact, they would get mad, the Scottish, and they would say, "We don't want this Catholic stuff into our church. We're Protestant." They know what the king was trying to do. He was trying to force them
to mingle in prosperity.
The Protestant and Catholic stuff together, and they didn't want that. Matter of fact, they said there was a story. They had one lady, she actually threw a chair at the pastor because she said, "You dare won't say a mass in my ear," like the Catholic mass. So she actually took a chair and threw it at the pastor. So that's not a good day for a pastor when you got a
No,
chair.
no.
When you got a chair thrown at you, that's not too good. So that is true.
Well, could you imagine
yeah.
you preaching and all of a sudden you see a chair coming at you?
Oh yeah, but and she did it. She had a righteous anger. It was not a bad anger. It was a righteous anger. She had it right. I hate to see when she was mad in the flesh.
That was a righteous anger throwing a chair at somebody.
Yeah, but hey, but they were Protestant. They were back then. They were Protestant. They're not like today. They were Protestant back then. They really protested back then. But what happened was the king also, that was a religious point, but the king also wanted to raise taxes because he wanted to fight a war. I think it was in Scotland. And Parliament was like, no new taxes. So there was a lot of political, a lot of religious.
A liberal king with a Republican parliament.
Yeah,
that's
exactly. And they were fighting. And so what happened was this ended up living to a civil war when the Cromwell, his name was, him and the king. It was called a parliamentarian army, they called it, because they were fighting with Parliament. They were fighting for the rights of what the Parliament were doing, and they had some that were fighting for the king. So that's where the Civil War came from. And the reason why this is important, because it will explain why John Bunyan got arrested years later. But what happened was the war took place, so John Bunyan joined with the Parliament. He was in the army with them. So he was fighting against the king. King Charles I. And what happened was they were fighting a war. As a matter of fact, his life was actually spared. They said they actually came to a town and they were besieging an area. And they had a guy, he was supposed to go fight in a certain area, but the guy took his spot. And kind of found out the bullet ended up hitting that guy. Ended up killing him instead of killing John Bunyan. So there was a few incidents where his life was almost died, but God spared him. Yeah, God spared him to write the book and to inspire. God had a plan for him. But as years came later, he was mad. You'd be shocked after all this, he was not really saved yet. Now, what happened was one day, he finally got married. He went back home and he reconciled with his dad. Him and his dad was not getting along. So him and his father, after the war, reconciled, and he got married to his first wife. And what happened was his wife was a Christian. She was a strong Puritan. Her and her family were strong Puritans. And John Bunyan was not saved yet. He was not a born-again man at this time. He was still cussing and lying. He was still doing things. But his wife had 2 Puritan books. And as a diary, she actually would read with John the Puritans with stuff, and it would touch him. That's the seed that was being planted, but he didn't quite get saved yet. What happened was one day he went to church like a lot of people, but he was not still saved. He went to church, did his religious duty, but he was not born again. But what happened was one day he was playing they call it kick cat. What it is, it's kind of like a baseball. It's like a bat, and you hit the ball through some loops. So it's kind of like baseball, kind of. And he was playing with his friends, and he heard a voice from heaven saying, Will thou leave thy sins and go to heaven, or have thy sins and go to hell? He heard the voice, clear as day, like Apostle Paul on the road to Damascus did. And he said it actually convicted him. But the problem is he still wasn't saved. He read his Bible. He said, well, I ain't going to curse no more. He said, I'm going to start living the 10 commandments. But he was like a lot of people. He had a moral conviction, but he didn't have a born again experience yet.
He was trying to live by the law.
Yes.
He wasn't trying to live according to the Spirit of God.
That's right.
Like going to the cross and trying to live that way.
But he didn't understand the born again.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
But he was like a lot of people.
He was like a lot of people. He was living by the law.
Yeah.
And it's funny, okay?
Yeah.
Let's look at his life and a lot of other Christians' lives right now.
A lot of Christians live like that.
Yeah. Let's say somebody that's searching. They know they're doing wrong, so they say, look, we're going to go ahead, we're going to stop cussing, stop doing all the worldly sins,
right?
And I'm going to read my Bible. That's the first thing they go to.
But that's still law.
Right, it's still law.
It is, yeah.
Some people, they do it as a work. They say, well, look, if I do this, I'm going to get saved, and they put their faith in that instead of the finished work of Christ. Now, God can use that to get them serious and get them ready to go.
Right.
But there's a lot of people like that.
Yeah, well, that's
a lot of people think that's the only thing they have to do is read and stop doing wrong.
Right,
and that's what he was thinking. He was thinking, if I do these certain things, I'll be having my standard with God. I'll be, his heart was in the right place, like a lot of people.
Right.
But he still didn't have the right source. What happened was one day he was walking through this town and he was mending pots and pans, and then one day he heard these women talking. They were talking about the new born again. They were talking about some other things, but they were talking about the new born again experience.
Right.
And he never heard that before. He was a religious, he went to church, you know, he did his thing, but he was like a newborn experience. He never heard that before. And he started talking to these ladies about, what y'all talking about? They explained about the new birth to him. And then finally he met a man, his name, he called him Holy Gifford, his name was. He was a pastor. He fought on the king's side of the war. And he was a drunk, he was a person, he was a gambler, until one day he got Puritan books and he got saved. And he actually influenced John Bunyan a lot. He actually got John Bunyan saved.
Right.
He had a big influence. Matter of fact, you know you're talking earlier about how authors, things happen in authors' lives?
Yeah.
Well, did you know when he comes to the house, in the book, he comes to the house of the interpreter, and the man in the story, that was his pastor in the fictional story. When he takes him to the room and he shows him God's judgment. He shows him about
like I said,
go ahead,
I know a lot of his book was a dream.
Yeah,
but God was basically showing him his walk through
exactly.
life, through a dream.
Yeah, through a dream.
Well, a lot of authors dream, and not a lot of authors, they're inspired by things or that happen in their life, or how can I say that?
Yeah, but
or things like. Things that inspired them in real life.
It's like John Bunyan. The way it sounds, it's like God was showing him things that were going to happen before it even happened.
Exactly.
Well, he didn't have the dream yet, though. This is when he first got saved. He's about to get
well,
saved.
what I'm saying is, it's like when God was showing him things.
When he had that dream, he was showing John Bunyan his life.
His life
in a dream, in a parable or a story type.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
Well, and matter of fact, the man in the dream was himself. And the burden that he carried on his back, you see, he was a thinker. He actually would carry some stuff on his back. In real life, he would carry tools and stuff. So there's a lot of things that happened in his life that went through the story.
Right.
It is a symbolized sin instead of his thinker stuff. But that was one of the men that influenced him, and he was called the interpreter in the story. And so it actually came. That's believed that was his inspiration in the dream or in the story. But what happened was God, he was starting to learn the word, and he was going to that church, and people started to notice, like, hey, he has many gifts. He could be useful in our church. And so what happened was they asked, can he speak? So he spoke at the church, and God used him, and he came on the elders there of that church. But the problem was, when things were going great, Cromwell died, the man who was not king, but because at the time England was a republic, they had no king because they threw off the first king off, Charles the first off. But what happened was Cromwell died, but before he died, he allowed everyone to have religious freedom. The Presbyterians, the Baptists, the Congregationists, the all groups could meet and worship freely. But what happened was when he died, the old monarch was restored to King Charles II. And then he came back with the old policies of, if you don't join the Anglican Church or the state church, you're going to be arrested or you're going to be banished from the kingdom and so on. So religious tolerance, as we know it, or religious freedom was taken away again. So this is what happened when he went preach, and it came an unlegal meeting, they call that. So if you didn't, they made an order, if you didn't go to your Anglican parish church, you were arrested, you were fined. But him and a lot of them didn't listen. They said, well, we don't believe we should belong to a church or organization. We're going to go preach the gospel the way what our conviction tells us to do. So they were preaching. John Bunyan went in Barnes. He went, whatever, he was welcome. He actually even preached underneath a tree. They say it's still there today. The oak tree where he actually go underneath there and actually preach. So he would go preach in Barnes, wherever he was invited. But they kind of found out one day he was doing a service, and I think it was at a barn, at a barn or a house or somewhere, and they arrested him. And so they put him in prison for breaking the law. And matter of fact, he actually went to a court, and there was a judge. Matter of fact, if you watch Pilgrim's Progress, there's another thing that was a part of his life. He made fun of him in the story. But remember that part when he went to Vanity Fair and the judge and all the juries were there? In real life, that really happened to him. Because in real life, he was really brought before a jury and stuff like that. He, like I said, he made fun of it. He made it like these judges were, this. He made it more of a silly,
Right.
yeah. But the thing is that really happened in real life. He was in front of a judge, Hategood. That was not his real name, but in the story there was a judge, and he was in front of a judge, and he called him Hategood in his story. So there was a lot of things in his life that influenced his writing in the dream. So that's pretty interesting. But anyway, so they had him in prison for a little while, and he did not write the Pilgrim's Progress yet. They believe, I'm about to get to it though, they believe by his second prison term, they believe he actually wrote the Pilgrim's Progress. But he wrote other books. He wrote, like, one of his books was A Grace Bounding to the Chief of Sinners. It was a book about his biography, about his life, and about his Christian walk and stuff like that. So that's his biography. I encourage people to get it. It's called A Grace Bounding to the Chief of Sinners. That's one of the books he wrote. Matter of fact, the first book he actually wrote was actually against the Quakers. I think it was called The Open of Gospel Truths, I think it was called, where he debated with them about some of their doctrine. And there was a rumor going around, and you hear it today through Jehovah's Witness and other groups, that Jesus was not the Son of God. So he got a whiff of this. He heard this. So this has encouraged him to write this book, telling his very first book, telling people like, hey, Jesus is the Son of God. And he had scriptures and history to prove it.
Hey, it's funny, and look, that was around in probably the 1700s, give or take.
Yes.
Before
America,
before even America was there, they had that theory that Jesus
was not the Son.
God. And
Yeah,
preachers had
preachers
been fighting that for years.
Even before Jehovah's Witness or these other groups. And so
it just showed that spirit of
it's always been
falsism and cultism.
Right.
Always been around.
Always traveling.
Well, even Apostle Paul, he had to fight against Gnostics and other false groups that were coming and forging his name and trying. So, yeah, you always had that conflict in Christianity. You always will have it. But anyway, that's what encouraged him to write this book. And he also wrote one about prayer. He was talking about how your heart, when you pray, your heart got to be into what you're praying. And so he wrote a book on that. Then things start picking up for him. But it's really the Pilgrim's Progress that really took off. That's one out of all his books. That's the best he's known for, and that's one of his best. But he wrote it in prison, and prisons were not like the prisons they have today. Matter of fact, he actually made shoelaces to sell through the prisoners and throughout. He actually gave it to his second wife, Elizabeth. He got married. At this time, he got married twice because his first wife died. So his second wife, Elizabeth, he would actually make shoelaces, and he actually give it to her, and she would go out there and sell in the market. So that was his way of providing for himself in the jail and feeding his family. And some of the book sales a little bit helped him. So it was not like today. You actually had to pay to stay in prison. You didn't have like, hey, the government like today, hey, we'll give you a bunch of food and a TV, and you got a luxurious lifestyle in prison. It wasn't like that. And the prisons were not comfortable. They were not, I mean, it was very...
you didn't have a gym. You didn't have cable
TV. No.
I think you didn't even have a toilet in there.
No, it was not very... those prisons were not really... That was prison. They purposely made those prisons to make you suffer. But, so it was rough for John Bunyan, but... I think God used the situation was going on in England and stuff to get John Bunyan, I think, into that position where he had to write the book. So God gave him a dream. He wrote the book. And then what happened was the king said, okay, I'm going to give religious indulgences. Like, other words, I'm going to give religious freedom. So he was out for a little while. Matter of fact, he actually became a pastor of an independent church. Matter of fact, and it's still there today, the church and stuff. It's called the John Bunyan Museum, or John Bunyan Meetings, they call it today. So anyway, but what happened was the king changed his mind again and said, well, no more religious tyrants again. So John Bunyan was put again in prison the second time, second or third time, whatever. And that's when they believe he actually wrote the Pilgrim's Progress, was his second prison, or his second or third. There's a debate of, did he write it the first time when he first went to prison, or did he wrote it or how can I explain? Some say he wrote the full book first time in prison. Some say no, and his second term he wrote half. And then he finished writing it later. It's just it's a lot of debates when he actually,
Didn't he tell anybody how many times? Like, did he say, I wrote a new book?
No,
he didn't
no.
tell nobody
No. But matter of fact, when he actually brought it to the printer, he says, I have a book of less importance. He didn't really think.
He didn't think that book was really going to go that far.
What that? No, I don't think. He just said he just didn't think. I don't know. It's hard to explain. I just don't think he didn't think it was that important as we have it today. That's what I think it was. He just didn't. He just like, oh, I just wrote a story. He didn't like. He didn't
That's
really.
That's maybe why he said that, and I'm speculating on that.
Yeah.
You have a lot of books about, prayer. He did a lot of books about spiritual growth, and like he said, he probably thought that this was a story that God gave me, and I just wrote it down.
Yeah.
But God should when you watch the movies, or and as your case, you read the books, you see a lot of yourself in that movie. You see a lot of yourself. Like you come to a point. How many times in our Christian walk? And look, if any believer tells me they've never been through that, they need to slap themselves in the face because they lied because
you can
relate
wake up to
from a
it.
dream.
Yeah.
Because how many Christians have went through that stage of life where everything was a sin to them? My dad's favorite story was when he first got saved, him and Pastor Mike and all of them, when they all got saved, they didn't want to eat devil food or devil cookies because it had the word devil in it.
It had the word devil. Your daddy told me that a lot of times.
Yeah.
So, but and look, it's not the mock now, but it's that every Christian goes through their walk in life where it's condemnation. That's why Paul said there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus who walk after the Spirit. They'll show the things of the Spirit, and if they walk out the flesh, show the things of the flesh.
Right.
So that's why Paul. I believe that's why God inspired Paul to write that. But we've all been through that. You know what I'm saying? We've all been through that time where, not severe persecution, but where somebody told us, well, look, if you keep believing in that Jesus stuff, you won't better hang around me.
Right.
And you're like, later.
Well, like, to example, and everybody can relate to this little part right here. Remember when he hit Doubting Castle?
Right.
Everybody has doubts. We have old giants of despair.
Lord.
And I like that in the story when Pilgrim or Christian says, when they left Vanity Fair, he says, we got to take this easy road. This road's getting harder and rocky, so we got to take this path. And Hopeful was like, Hopeful was like, no, we shouldn't take that. Oh, come on, let's go. I think it was Faithful or Hopeful.
I think it's Faithful.
Faithful.
Oh, no, not Hopeful. Because Hopeful came in after Vanity Fair.
Yeah. So what happened was they took this path and they went to the Giants' territory, Giant Despair's territory, and he took them into his Doubting Castle. He was trying to discourage them to commit suicide and things today that, Yeah,
you never watched the movie or anything.
And then finally, he felt something in his pocket, and he says, how stupid am I? All this time I was in Doubting Castle, and I had the key called Promise. And I could have been out here a long time ago. So, in the key of Promise that came from the cross. Yeah. You remember when they gave it to him?
You need to watch it. You have to watch it because, it is very powerful.
But anyway, he takes the key of Promise and he unlocks the door to Down Castle, and him and them leave. And they set up a stone warning other pilgrims not to come in that direction again. So things like that
that relates
to us. We have bills, we have discouragement sometimes. Like us with this rain, it's very. It got very despairing and discouraging because you're trying to pay bills. And
like, Lord, did you tell us to build an ark?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes in life, you will have it. So things like that can relate to Christian and to people in general.
And it points, and that's the message of the cross. I agree with it, and I think we have to rely on what Jesus Christ did at the cross as the finished work that we have. And when people say, "Well, look, there's more than the cross. There's more than the cross."
No.
That line right there, where he got the key of promise from.
Yeah, the cross.
When he went ahead and surrendered his life to Christ, and the burden fell at the cross. Now, we're not in the for point of for people. I had people say, "Well, when you talk about the cross, you're talking about us worshiping the cross." No, I'm not talking about the beams. I'm talking about the sacrifice Christ gave on the cross. That's a general terminology of Christians, but we're talking about Jesus Christ and Him crucified.
If it would not, and I've said that, and I keep that in my heart. If it would not be for the sacrifice, if it would not be for the cross, if it not be for what the Son of God done for us, we would not get the blessings that we
Yep.
get. We would not get the spiritual gifts that the Spirit gives us. Joy, peace,
That's right.
and
That's right.
and long suffering, and the grace of God would not be there even.
Right.
So when we talk about the cross, we're not talking about we're not talking about something that's just something,
a figure of
right,
a piece of wood.
right. It's not a piece of wood or a figure of imagination. It's something that Jesus did to set man free from sin.
Right, and it goes to the
Right,
point,
that's
like,
right.
I'm using it for the point because a lot of people focus on that. They focus on the beams, and they
It's not about
they
the-
idolize the beams. And that, it's
Right.
not about the beams; it's
But
about the
it's not
sacrifice
about
of Christ.
that. It's
But
about the sacrifice.
Well, use for example, we mentioned Jehovah's Witness earlier. A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses will come and debate that when you say it was a T-cross beam, it was a stake. And I told him, I said, does it really matter what the
What it
cross was?
It's just the
It
blood.
don't matter.
He died on it to pay the price.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, you remember you were talking about that earlier, how when he came to the mountain,
Right.
one of the things that evangelist told him, he said, worldly wise men made you a defense, like it made the cross a defense to you. He made you believe that there was other ways other than the
Right.
cross. And so that made sense. And there's many denominations doing that today. There's the cross, but there's good works, or there's baptism, or the Lord's Supper.
No,
There's
they had
other
a law- they had-
salvations
they had-
too.
But Boogie-
They had the
And,
works
you
of
know,
law and the works of sloppy grace.
and
you could say.
that's what I like about that part. That's one of the powerful parts in that in the story is when he goes on Mount Sinai and he realizes that worldly wise men led him to to works instead of the cross. He said, "You made the cross a defense to you."
Boogie, you said something about John Bunyan when he went to the castle of doubt.
The doubting despair.
The doubt and despair.
Yeah.
And you said he reached there and he had the key.
The key called promise.
The key of co-promise. Think about the cross. Jesus went down and got the key to death and hell.
Yeah, yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
Doesn't that just line up
Yeah.
perfectly?
Yep. Yeah,
That
yeah.
Christ has got the key of death and hell and told Satan, you have this no more. It is mine.
Yeah.
I take it from you. You have no more control.
Yeah, that makes sense,
I'm
yeah.
taking it now. I have the keys of death and hell, and it's coming with me.
I think
about that.
Yeah, I think, in my opinion, the key of promise represents two things. I think in the story, the cross represents salvation, like you
Right,
said,
right.
and I think it also means the promises that when you are saved, promises that God
the promises that God made.
Yeah, promises like what happened in Revelations.
Right.
When God told these churches, if you continue in the faith, I'll write you in the pillar of the stones, and I will give you a pillar of your name.
That's
on it.
right.
So
There you go. It lines up.
It lines
man.
up
It
with
just
both.
lines up
Yeah,
with book.
yeah.
You know?
So after he finished his book and he brought it to the printer, he went back to prison, or he
No. Matter of fact, he was a pastor. He stayed pastor. But what happened was, I think at the age of 60, what happened was there was a son and father arguing. So somebody says, can you go reconcile them? And he knew how it was because that happened with him and his dad. So him and his dad argued, but they got together, but he knew how it was. So he went, and he got on a horse, and I think it was towards London, and he went and he reconciled the man and the son together. But when he was coming back, a rainstorm came and he got drenched. And some people believed he got ammonia, and they believe he went to his friend's house who was sick, and they believe he died at his friend's house. And then, matter of fact, he's buried in, I think it's...
How old was John Bunyan when he died?
I understand if I heard it, I think he was 60.
60.
I think he was 60 years old when he died.
That's young.
Yeah, that's young.
That's a young life.
But God
But
took
God
him,
used him in a mighty way.
and God was done with him. He did.
Yeah.
But,
and you think about it too.
Yeah.
The thing that he thought would be the least became the greatest.
Yeah.
Look how far Pilgrim Progress went.
Oh, it's still read.
It's
still read
today, and it's still being used.
And there's a lot. Like I said, the Pilgrims came here with 3 books.
Right.
Yes.
There was the Bible.
And that's
It
been
was
a long time ago,
Fox's
man.
Book of
It's
Martyrs,
old.
and then it had the Pilgrim's Progress.
Just think about that.
And you know, his books actually influenced many authors in history. C.S. Lewis, they said, the one who wrote the Chronicles of Narnia.
Yeah.
They said, I don't agree with everything, but in his doctrine and stuff, or his
I know
theology.
there's a lot of pastors that read his book.
A lot of pastors were influenced by him. A lot of authors.
A lot of authors.
I think the man who wrote the Crusoe, the one about when that man was on that island
Okay.
And I think he was influenced by John
I
Bunyan's
think
writing.
wasn't Lord of the Rings? No, not the Lord of the Rings.
No.
Either, though, huh?
No,
the Rider?
no. It was C.S. Lewis that was inspired. They said by him. The one who wrote the Crusoe, John the Crusoe.
I must be thinking of something else.
Well, he was influenced. I think he was a pastor too. The one who wrote that, he was a
right.
pastor. No, I'm sorry, not him. It's the one who wrote Swiss Family Robinson was a pastor. He was a Swiss pastor. He wrote it, but a lot of them were influenced. I don't know if he was influenced by Bunyan, but he was. And the song "Beautiful Land."
How about the one?
Yeah.
The one, maybe not, but is it Switchblade and the Cross or something?
No, Crossing the Switchblade. That's Dave Wilkerson.
No, that's Dave Wilkerson.
He wasn't influenced by that.
I don't know. I don't think so.
You don't think
You know
so?
how many?
No.
You know how many older pastors have read John Bunyan's "The Pilgrim's
That's
Progress"?
why I said that.
Yeah,
he
maybe,
probably
maybe,
has. He
maybe.
probably has.
Well, like Beautyland, the song Beautyland,
yeah.
that was influenced. The writer, the one who wrote that song,
Right.
he was influenced by John Bunyan's
Yeah,
story. Because in the
right.
story, Pilgrim and them go to Beautyland, and I hate to break it to some people, but Beautyland is not heaven.
It's not heaven.
It means the land of marriage.
Right.
And I heard it from Pastor Mike told me
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
It bordered, if you read the book of Pilgrim's Progress, it bordered heaven. It wasn't heaven itself. Like
But
it was right.
It borders heaven.
It borders heaven. So it's
Yeah.
not heaven. So I know a lot of people think it means
Right,
heaven, but it
right.
don't. But
I think Brother
Yeah.
Mike had told me that one
yeah,
time.
he told me that.
Yeah,
Because that's what
told
I
me
thought.
that.
I thought it meant heaven.
Yeah.
And he said, Boogie, it don't mean heaven, though. I said, really? He said it means the land of marriage. And I
Land
looked
of
it up on my
marriage,
phone.
yeah.
And it said the land of
yeah,
marriage.
yeah.
So, but he was influenced, and there's many songwriters that were influenced by John Bunyan and
Funny
stuff.
when somebody submits to God's will and says, "Lord, use me."
Yeah.
He won
yeah.
souls through his
yeah.
preaching.
Yeah.
He touched millions with one book that
One
God
book
told him to do.
that he didn't think would ever
Didn't ever go far.
would ever go anywhere. He
and
said,
you know- That's
why-
I
that's
just
why,
wrote, he said, I just wrote a simple story.
That's
yeah,
why- that's
he
why
said,
I
I
told-
wrote a book of no importance.
No importance.
And that's what I tell my youth that all the time.
Yeah.
If you're called by God, pursue God's call. The last
That's
message I
right.
preached at youth was that.
Well, I done messed up
But-
God calling my life.
But
No,
you know
you
what's
haven't. Look
amazing
where you at
thing?
right now. Look where you at.
But you see, now this is the
Did
amazing
you ever
thing.
think you'd be on a podcast
No,
talking to
no,
states and
no,
talking
no,
Well,
no,
talking
what-
to countries?
no.
Well, and this is the thing about John Bunyan. He was popular back in his day. He sold like 700 copies of his book back in the day, and that's not a lot today.
He sold a lot more than that by now, though.
Oh yeah,
I'm
he's
sure.
up in the millions.
But believe it or not, he was more popular and more. I don't know what it is about people like me who write books or people who paint, but mostly our stuff don't do good until we dead. I don't know why. I don't
Boogie,
know
you're
why.
not gonna die anytime
No,
soon.
no,
You're not going anywhere, Boogie.
I know, but it's
It's
just,
hard to kill back
yeah,
grass.
but yeah, you're right. Back to court, kill weed. No, but I don't know why. But John, at time your work
it's
comes more popular.
it's just not
Yeah,
it's just not
yeah.
art and
Yeah.
books or anything.
Music too.
art.
But
We had
Yeah.
maybe a bad way to say it like that, but Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson was in
Yeah,
the dumps
exactly.
when he died. The
He's
next
more
day,
popular.
Everything just exploded.
Yeah, he was more, yeah. But that's what happened with John Bunyan. When he died, what happened was missionary work was going all over the world. And what happened was this has really popped up his popularity when, take example, they would go to India, like in England or America, they would try to
Right.
go evangelize those places. They would actually take the book with them. And so when they got people saved through these lands, that was like the second book that helped them with their walk with the Lord. So his book,
Boogie,
his book really came
Boogie, I'm
popular.
going to tell you something.
Yeah.
You've written 2 books already.
Yes, yeah,
That inspires me.
yeah,
It really
yeah.
does.
Oh, and it was
And
work
I
too.
I think down the road, somewhere down the road, you're going to write another one.
Oh, I got a lot planned. I got a lot of stories planned. Believe me, I just think
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I really believe that.
Yeah.
I don't know what your brother believes, but
Yeah.
I really believe down the road you're going to write another book.
And sometimes I ain't gonna lie to you, it does get kind of discouraging because you're like,
But like I
you
told
know,
you, if you
but-
need help,
yeah,
I always told you that because
Yeah.
I like what you're doing. I enjoy what you're doing.
Right,
I got
right.
both of your books already. I got both
yeah,
of them.
yeah.
I read.
You don't have none of my books. Though,
No, I
man.
don't have none of your books. But-
I don't even have.
But every
Yeah.
book you're gonna write, 9 out of
Yeah.
10 I'm gonna buy. But I always told you if you need
Yeah.
help
I appreciate it.
to promote or to do anything with those books,
Yeah.
let me know. I'll help you.
I
with it.
appreciate it because we
Yeah.
need them more than ever, you know.
Anything to do with the work of God, anything.
You
Yeah.
think about
I'm gonna invest money into it because I know down the road,
Yeah.
that money's gonna that blessing's gonna come
And
back.
look,
It's just like John Bunyan. He
Remember
never
you said,
thought.
Right.
You said that, sometimes you get discouraged and look, this man was in prison 2 to 3
Yeah,
times.
I was thinking
Right,
about that.
right.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? He like, Lord, you're telling me to write a book, and I'm
Yeah,
in
that's true.
shackles. I can't see my
That-
family.
exactly.
Well,
And-
if you study him and you study all the great men in the Bible and all great men of faith,
Look at
they
Paul.
all had troubles.
Look at
they
Paul.
all, they
Paul,
all had,
man.
yeah.
Paul wrote what 2/3 of the New Testament,
And look all the trouble. He was shipwrecked.
Look at
and-
Paul, bro. Paul
Yeah.
went through more than any apostle that I know of,
Oh yeah, and you see how he
and look how he
accomplished.
turned out.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, guys, that was a great journey through history a little bit. Talked a little bit about the Reformation. We talked about some great church history, so that was a good topic, Book.
I
Yeah, it
appreciate
was.
it. And
Very
I want to
good
encourage people before we leave, go look up his other books. There's another book he wrote. It's called The Holy War by John Bunyan. It was a story of the city that represents the soul of men. And Satan and God is fighting over the city, and it represents us. It
us,
represents,
yeah.
And so I encourage people to go look up. There's another allegory or another fiction book he wrote.
Right.
That's one of my favorites. John, other than Pilgrim's Progress, that's one of my favorite books that I think, in my opinion, he wrote. So I
Yeah.
encourage y'all to go that and just go look up John Bunyan. The books he wrote is online, and there's a bunch of documentaries on them. I mean, because we couldn't get through everything. We did.
No.
We got 90% of everything, but
Right.
there's still some little things we couldn't
There's a
get
lot of
to.
things you can cover.
So
yeah.
go look them up.
All right, guys. Well, look, Bowen, next week, unless
Yeah,
something
you're
changes,
next.
Well, I'll let you know what's coming
Oh
up.
yeah, we got
I'll let
some
y'all know.
good. If anybody want to go ahead and get in contact with us, you can go ahead and find us on Facebook at Brothers Just Searching. Also, if this is the first time you've listened to this podcast, we hope you enjoyed it. We pray that we blessed you and the Lord blessed you through our topic for tonight. If you can go ahead and hit that subscribe button, that helps out you. Helps us out more than you know. It helps us out with downloads and plays, but it also gives you some benefits as well. It goes ahead and gives you all the new episodes that come out on your device, if it's a smartphone or a computer. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor FM, and many more platforms. If you go to our Facebook page, you have all the links down there. And I told Bowen earlier, there's some I didn't even know that was on there. They're not showing on the list, but they're on the web. So also you can go find us at brothersjustsearching.wordpress.com. That is our new website. You can get all the new episodes there as well. We go ahead and we post, and that's opening a lot of doors for us out there. We also want to thank the two churches that help us out, New Beginnings Fellowship Church and Coteau Holmes Fellowship. You can find in the description their websites and Facebook page. So guys, until next week, we hope you be blessed. We hope you stay encouraged. And remember, Jesus is on the throne. He is coming back. Are you ready to meet him? If not, it'll be a good time to get to know him. And until next week, y'all have a good one.